Okay, so in this module, we'll be creating multiple child classes of the projectile in Blueprint so that we can demonstrate how this will allow us to very quickly and easily make some changes and end up with a couple of unique types of projectile that we can swap out in the editor. Now, this is going to be another one of those very simple, very quick modules where the end result is going to be super simple to achieve. So before we dive into creating our blueprints, I just wanted to spend a moment again just revisiting the C++ code and how the specific parts of what will be affecting the end goals for this module, basically just looking at how they're set up. So what we have in the projectile class, we have the projectile movement component controlling how the projectile moves around the world, and the static mesh visually representing that. Now, as I kind of touched on before, these are both set up in a really convenient way where the U property is exposing these to be visible anywhere and even blueprint readable. But of course, being a purely C++ project, these kind of benefits that are exposed in the C++ class are not being utilized. And then beyond that, because of the way that this is going to need to be set up, everything is set either by a hard reference to a directory location or being set on the constructor for things like the movement speeds. And again, if we wanted to change and adapt this, make some tests, then we're going to find we're going to have to come in and change the initial speed, the max speed, recompile, see if that works, go back in and out. And that just causes a lot of editor to C++ kind of swapping around, and we want to just avoid that where possible. So what we're going to do to make this very simple for us in future modules to just jump into the code and make our changes, we're going to carry on like we did in the previous module and just create some more of our blueprint classes ready for us to make these quick tests and changes. So inside of the C++ folder, find the twin stick projectile, right click on this like we've done before, and choose to create a blueprint class based on the projectile. Now again, I'm going to put this just straight into the blueprints folder, and I'll call the first one BP underscore projectile normal. Okay, so nice and simple. The way that this one's going to work, this will take all of the default settings that we had in the C++ class. Like I said, we can see here we've got the projectile movement exposed as well as the mesh. This means we can now really easily come in. We can see the initial speed has been set to 3000. The max is 3000, like in the code file on the constructor. So we're going to leave this one as it is. This will essentially be the replacement for the C++ variant that we've used so far. Then back in the blueprints folder, what I'm going to do is just Control W on the projectile that we already have. And I'm going to rename this one, just change the normal to slow. Whilst I'm here, I'll just do the same again and rename the next one to fast. Okay, so we now have a slow, normal, and fast projectile. And of course, the main changes in the slow and the fast, I'm just going to open these back up. I personally find this easier to do in the full editor, so I'm just going to open the full blueprint editor. And for the slow projectile, I'll just put this down to maybe half the speed. And to really visualize that something different is happening here, I'm also going to go to the projectile mesh and maybe set this to 2 or 3 times the size that it was previously. Okay, so we now have a bigger, slower mesh, so this is again going to be very clear that we're using a different object. If you wanted, you could come in and change some materials, maybe make some new materials, and apply that here. In fact, we already have a blue material, so I'll make this one blue. So again, this will stand out. The visualization isn't too important, it's really just to get the idea across there. In a similar way, we're just going to go back in and then open the fast projectile. And you can probably guess I'm going to do some very similar things here. So I'll just come in and I'll change the movement speed first of all, and I'll just double this. This may be a bit fast, but we'll find out again in our very quick prototyping, so it won't make as much of an issue if we put some bizarre numbers in here. And that is really part of the idea of this, is that we can easily try variables that we might think won't work, but it's going to take a second or two to test that and then change it back to something else. Now for this one being faster, maybe it'll be a little bit smaller. So in fact, I think these are quite hard to see as they are. So maybe we'll leave the size the same, but I'll set this to be the gray material. So these are all going to be very clearly different when they're fired. Okay, so that is our 3 projectile classes ready to go. Now at the moment, of course, we don't really have the logic set up in the C++ pawn class to account for these classes. So we can't really see the difference at the moment. But what this means is that as we move forward now, we can start changing our pawn class as well. And we can open up the functionality to take in different projectiles, easily swap these out, test them for the given gameplay that we're going for. And again, all of this is going to be available by the end through the editor. Okay, so in this module, we have created a couple of different projectile variations, which will allow us to very easily test the player firing these new projectile types when we make our player class improvements. And that, of course, is going to be the next topic, which will be improving the pawn firing functionality.